My name is Michel McDonald. My story is I was abused as a child by my stepfather. My mother told me when I was 18 months old, she met my stepfather. My first memory is of him already abusing me. I actually remember being in diapers for some reason. I can remember one particular time. There was a group of kids that were a little older than me, and they brought me to where at the end of the driveway for the parking for the apartment building, and they were having me pick up rocks to see if I could lift them. Well, my stepdad saw me and he thought I was throwing rocks at cars, and he ran over to me, grabbed me by my arm, just lifted me and swatted my behind all the way back to the apartment, and he just started wailing on me. He would take my pants off completely, pants and underwear, and just start hitting me with the belt. And the memory that I have, I wasn't doing anything. I hadn't even started to pick up the rock. I already knew it was too heavy to pick up. And it wasn't a little tiny rock. I guess he saw what he wanted to see, and he thought that I was doing something wrong. It seemed like from that day forward, every time I moved a muscle, every time I looked at the wrong thing, I had bad intentions, whether I knew it or not. I wasn't in school yet. I want to say that I was probably 3, maybe 4. I don't really remember because there are so many times that I was hit for literally nothing. And sometimes the memories of that early time in my life, it just all blends together. That one with the rocks was my earliest actual memory. My stepfather was very strict, and he just had a mean look on his face and anger all the time. Every time I looked at him, he had an angry look on his face, and every time I looked at him, I felt like I had done something wrong. And I know I didn't do anything wrong. He just made it seem like I had done something wrong. And it was always like that. Every time I looked at him, I was always walking on eggshells because he was very violent and very mean. He would always use his glasses and lower them like this and look at you like this. And you knew that it was not going to be good. You knew that you were in trouble for something. I literally had to live with this man in my life. He was married to my mother. I had no choice, and I lived in the house since I was 1.5 years old until I was 15, and then I was homeless. When I was 15 years old and I was homeless, I was living with a friend from school in his trailer, and when my parents finally took me back into the trailer, that same night I held a knife to my stomach and threatened to kill myself in front of my mother and 2 sisters. And my older sister, convinced me to give her the knife, and I ran away. And the next day I woke up on somebody's floor in their trailer and discovered that the SWAT team was out there looking for me. And I evaded them for several hours, and they finally caught up to me and arrested me and wanted to know why I did what I did. I didn't tell them why I wanted to do that because I didn't want to get my family into trouble, my parents into trouble, because I love them. And if anything would happen that was bad, I would rather it happen to me and not them. When I was 13 years old, I started to choke myself to hope that I would die in my sleep. And sometimes I would pass out, but sometimes I would chicken out and just let go, and I would be able to breathe again. But sometimes I did pass out, and I would wake up the next morning and be like, I'm still here. And so when I threatened to stab myself when I was 15, it was the reason why is because I'm back, and things are not going to change. Things are going to be bad. Things are going to be bad forever, and I'm never going to get out of this. And I need to escape somehow. And that was the only thing that I could think. When my sister asked me for the knife, it took maybe a minute before I finally gave it to her because I didn't want to die. I wanted to live, but I also didn't want to live with them and the abuse. It was just too much. And sometimes people feel like it's too much and don't want to live anymore. Well, one time when I was about 12 years old, my sister accidentally knocked over a lamp. She saw that I was being physically abused by my stepfather, and for some reason, she told my parents that I did it. My stepfather was hitting me with the belt. My sister was in the other room, and I could hear her cackling in the other room. That's the first time she started to physically abuse me. And she would also torment me psychologically. Every time she could think to get me in trouble, she did. And I would get abused and she would laugh, and I could hear her laughing. I don't know why she would do that, because we were brother and sister, half brother and sister, but we were still brother and sister, and he was our stepfather. I just don't understand why she would betray me like that. And the abuse went on for many years. And one day she ripped my shirt. She grabbed my shirt and just ripped it apart off my body. And when she did that, after so many years of abuse from her, I just broke down into tears. I couldn't stop crying. See, the thing is that when I was 17, my mother confronted me about being gay because they were reading the letters from my boyfriend, and they had been reading the letters for 2 years. And my mother asked me if I was gay, and I said yes. And so she yelled at me, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and all this other things. And she gave me the next letter because I told her that I would tell him to stop writing. But I did write to him and told him where I was, and he came to see me, and my mother found out that he was there, and she kicked me out of the house, and I was homeless for 10 months. When I was a couple months away from turning 18 years old, I was told that I could come back to live with them, but I would be under much stricter rules. And I was given the option of living with my parents or my sister and her boyfriend, and I chose my sister and her boyfriend because I thought it was the easier way to come back to the family. Until I was kicked out again, I was homeless for almost a year. So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I remember watching cartoons, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV unless it was cartoons on Saturdays and Sunday mornings. There was one time in particular I would watch Popeye, the Sailor Man. That was his cartoon too. He liked it. He and I watched it together, and every Saturday and Sunday it was a show with Tom Hale, who would draw the cartoons out too. And every time we would sit down and watch it together, I felt so good. I felt like we were bonding. And as soon as it was over, I knew that it was over. I knew that as soon as the show ended, things were going to go right back to the way they were. And they did. When I was probably 3 or 4, the first time I remember spilling something, he literally grabbed me by the arm, pulled me into another room, took my pants off and my underwear or whatever, and started hitting me with the belt. It hurt really bad. I can still feel the pain. There were other times when he would also hit me in the head. Sometimes he would punch me in the head. I remember when I was 12 years old, I remember he punched me in the head, and my mom said, "Not the head, not the head." She would always pretend like I wasn't being abused, but she knew it was happening, but she would deny the fact that I was being abused. She didn't want to believe it, I think, or she just didn't want to acknowledge it, but she knew it was happening, because otherwise she would not have said, "Not the head, not the head." It felt so terrible that my mother knew that it was happening, but she did nothing. She never yelled at him, but mostly she was not there. Whenever I was being hit or abused or whatever, physically, she would be at work. So she never saw most of the abuse. She was only there for the verbal abuse. But then she took a side. I started to think that this was normal. This is the way everybody was treated. And so I guess I just started to feel like, well, I guess this is normal. This is life. I developed a coping mechanism. I started joking. And my mom said that before she met him, she would bring me to parties, and she said that I was the life of the party. But I think I was too young to make jokes. I don't even know if I was even old enough to talk. But whenever I would see that he would laugh at something that I said that was funny, I started to use that as a coping mechanism. And I would try, if I saw that he was getting angry, I would try to make a joke or try to make him laugh somehow so that he wouldn't be angry anymore. And sometimes it worked, but mostly they thought that I was being serious. They would see my joke as being passive aggressive, and it was not my intention at all. My intention was to make them laugh. When I was, I want to say 13 years old, he actually connected his fist to my mouth. We were going to go work somewhere in an apartment. He had everything set up in the van. We were carrying a ladder to the van. I lost my grip on my side of the ladder. That's when he ran over to me and started hitting me. And then he said, "Get in the house." And then so I started running towards the door to the apartment building. And I turned around and looked at him, and that's when he connected his fist to my mouth. And then I ran into the apartment, and I went into the bathroom and closed the door, and my mouth was bleeding right on the top of my teeth. He ran into the apartment and started trying to open the bathroom door, and he started banging on the door, telling me to get out here because I am coming with him. I was terrified. That was the first time he'd ever actually connected his fist to my face. I had bad grades in school, and when I was in the 5th grade, a teacher came in and called my name and pulled me into another room of the school and was teaching me a lesson there, school lesson. She told me that I had a learning disability and that I was going to be in special ed probably for the rest of the time I was going to be in school. And that started in the 5th grade, and my grades in special ed were always good because they were easier. I always had bad grades, and I would avoid showing my stepfather my report cards. I don't think that I was ever hit for the report cards, but I did get yelled at. When I was in the 7th grade, one of the kids came over to me, and I was new to the school, and he told me to say something in Spanish that I will not repeat. It was not a good word. He said to say this to another kid, a bigger kid, and I said it because I didn't know any better. I didn't know Spanish. I had no idea what I was saying. And that was the very first day I was bullied in junior high school. Every single day, the whole time I was at that school, from 7th and 8th grade. Every time I saw him, I would worry I was going to be bullied. And a lot of the times, he would jump on me on my back. When he jumped on my back, I would fall to the ground and he would just start punching me. I went to therapy in the 90s when I was in my 20s, and the therapist actually helped me to think about things differently. I started to get to the realization that because I was so clumsy that, life happens. Anytime something happened in my life, I would just say, well, that's how it went. And that's how I'm going to have to deal with it. And it is what it is. That was the motto. And also I had another motto, expect the worst, but hope for the best. So that was a lot of what I got out of therapy. I would say that for anybody who is being physically, verbally, mentally, psychologically abused by a parent or a sibling, it will go away as soon as you're no longer living with those people. And when you are no longer living with them, blood doesn't just mean family. You can make your own family, and you have to surround yourself by people you care about that also care about you. And it might be an aunt or an uncle or cousins or grandparents, but you have to surround yourself by people who care. And it could just be friends. Friends might care more than your own family. And you have to hold on to that. You have to create a whole new family and hang on to that family and make the best of your life. Well, I started writing a book when I was 19 years old on my first computer, which was an Apple IIe. And I didn't have that computer for very long, and I lost the discs. When I turned 40, I mentioned to my doctor, because I'm HIV positive, I mentioned to my doctor that with the medicines they have now, I will probably live until old age. And he said to me, I wouldn't go that far. You probably have 10 more years left. So that was when I knew I needed to start writing my book. And I started writing it in 2010, and I published it in 2012, self-published. And the whole time I was writing the book, every memory that I ever had started coming to the surface. Not always in the right order, but the memories just started pouring out. Before I started writing the book, the memories were actually haunting me. I would think about something and it was terrible. So when I started writing the book, it actually helped me write the book because the memories were already drowning my mind. And so it helped me to write the book, and I started remembering things that I didn't remember, and which actually made it a little more difficult. I worked through it, and I was told in therapy to write letters or to write the memories down and then throw them away or burn them, but I published a book. I have been with my life partner for 30 years, and I'm 54 years old now. I was 23 when we met. We just have a good life, and there's no abuse, there's no physical, there's no verbal, there's no psychological abuse. I am the happiest I've ever been in my life, and I can truly say without the shadow of a doubt that it does get easier. And once you are no longer in that situation, you're no longer speaking to the family who abuse you, and you don't have to speak to them. Things will start to look up, and I never thought I would be in a relationship for 30 years, but here I am.